Hey, we live.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
How's everybody doing? So this is day 3 in our installments with the conversations with the District 20 special election candidates. So we had Dale Honus on Saturday, right?
Yep.
And then we had Emmanuel Morel yesterday. And now we're finally into the women.
The women, it's the year of the woman.
The year of the woman. You know, I got yelled at on Saturday because I was like, I'm all about the Black women. So we're gonna have a conversation with Sheila Cherfilus McCormick. I hope I said it right, Sheila, who is the District 20. And for all of you who don't know, this is Sheila's
Third time.
time running for the same seat. She's been consistent, okay? And she has been all about this district. So I just want people to know that she's invested. So she's been consistent. So I'm hoping third time's a charm, Sheila. And so we're going to give you a few minutes to talk about your platform, talk about why, what visions you have for the district, for District 20, and why you decided to run again.
Okay. Well, good evening.
Good evening. Go ahead.
You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, now
Okay.
we can.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, ladies, for having me. It's always fun to talk to good friends of mine who share very similar outlooks and controversial outlooks. So I know tonight's going to be fun. I'm Sheila, District 20. I'm originally
Sheila, you're breaking up just a little bit, and I want people to be able to hear everything that you're saying. Is there a way for you to adjust what you got? If you can adjust it.
Okay.
Sure. Oh, that looks great, but I'm just saying in terms of the Wi-Fi or whatever, because you're breaking up just a little bit. Maybe if it's your phone and you have it laying down, that might work.
Right, I laid it to the side. Is that better? Are the speakers still covered?
Yes.
Okay. I hear like a beeping. Is that mine?
That's me. I'm sorry. I'm gonna take it off. That's me.
Okay. All righty.
All right. Go ahead.
So yeah, I'm from Miramar, Florida. Originally, I went to Howard University for undergrad, University of Maryland for my master's in business administration, and St. Thomas University School of Law. I originally started running for Congress after probably 10 years of lobbying in DC. I initially was invited to go to DC based on our success in implementing the Affordable Health Care Act. And I was asked to talk about how can other businesses incorporate it successfully, but more importantly, how can we make sure that more people in the community are accessing healthcare. And so after doing that for 10 years and putting up other issues that we had in the community, not just healthcare, but equitable healthcare outcomes, barriers to healthcare, economic barriers, it just started expanding. But during that time, I was a single parent raising my daughter. I've been raising her by myself for a while. I recently got married probably 5 years ago. And advocating for children with learning disabilities became really close to me because my daughter had one. And I saw the number of kids who were being diagnosed with learning disabilities, autism. It just seemed like this generation, we just had an exponential number, especially in communities of color. And when I saw what it took, the resources it took, I said, oh my God, there's no way we can afford that. And it's disproportionate once again. If you had money, then you can afford treatments and you can afford developmental skills and help for your child versus if you didn't. And I didn't feel like it was right that my child should have to be displaced to have to attend one of these schools when, you know, our neighborhood, our community, our family, it shouldn't be that situation. And that's when I started running. And as I started running, it just became more and more apparent that for us to get the change that the district needed, we need to have bold leadership, people who weren't afraid. And that's exactly what I offer in this race. I tell everybody that I'm unbought and unbothered. I can say whatever I want. There's no lobbyist controlling me. There's no funding controlling me. I belong to the people and I fight for the people. And with that, I'm able to be unapologetic and say what needs to be said and challenge who needs to be challenged. And that's really why our district has not been able to move forward. Everybody in this race has a track record. And I keep bringing that up because although I'm not an elected official, I've been able to do things that many people in my race can't say that they've done. During COVID, when people were laying off people, our business and our company were able to hire more than 1,200 people. We were able to do that throughout the state, we were the largest Black woman-ran firm and owned company that vaccinated throughout the whole state and tested. In that time period, we fought for that. We fought to bring on other companies. We bought on more than 3 companies who totaled more than $10 million in federal contracting and federal funding. With all of our employees, we paid nobody less than $20 an hour. So everything they said we could not do, we have done. And the way we even got that transition or that push forward was by me lobbying and advocating for our community. During that process, it just came more and more apparent. We saw that Broward County did not pull down the funding that was allocated to us specifically by the state, by the president. And we had to have employees working in Miami-Dade, where we had Daniel Cava-Levine pull down more than $10 million in canvassing. That's a huge issue because when we look at the problems that we're facing now, a lot of it has to do with education. The education that needs to go forth to ensure that we actually have people teaching about the vaccination and testing. It wasn't done in our district, and we have to address why that was. Why wasn't that money that was delegated to us? Why didn't we put it down? And so that's why I'm running. We have a huge issue when it comes to social justice, but we have an even bigger one when it comes to economic justice. And I feel like we're allowed to talk about social justice. People will let us say that. But once we start talking about economic justice, there's a huge issue. All of a sudden, we're problematic. Once we start competing for contracts, we become problematic. Once we start making our own money, all of a sudden, it had to be stolen. And so I tell everybody, we have to understand what this election really is about. This election is about economic justice. The money that's being put out, we've never seen that money since FDR. We just had an article where the Federal Reserve even stated that for our generation, this could be our last opportunity to build wealth. So you have to ask yourself this question: which candidates are prioritizing economic justice? Who has successfully acquired contracts, federal contracts, hired, and actually brought stimulus into the district? We all have a track record, and this is a moment. And I tell everybody, let's not get it twisted. This is an economic and social justice moment. And I have that strong track record, and I'm here to take the district further so we can accomplish the goals that we need to. We're picking up right where Martin Luther King left off. And that was about economic justice and recovery.
Unmute yourself, co-host.
Yes, that was a lot. You touched on a bunch of points. I was trying to I took some notes while you were discussing what it is that you were doing. And I hope the folks that are watching right now, because we are live both on YouTube and Facebook. And if you're watching us on either one, please like our page and also please subscribe to our YouTube channel. All things race and politics. All right. So let's just start with this first. So okay. You have not held any elected positions, whether it be local, from my understanding. Why is it that you decided to run for this seat first and not necessarily something local where you could, in fact, do something? You said you're from Miramar, you grew up in the area. Why not run and do something directly for the residents of Miramar as opposed to going and taking a seat, running for a seat that's in Washington, D.C., before you at least have a full understanding of local politics and what it is that the people in the community want?
Well, that's an interesting question. My specialty has always been federal. So I've been lobbying in federal, I've been advocating in federal, and a lot of people have a misconception that just because you did municipal or you've been at the state that you can play the federal game. In state, you're running by the state constitution. You know your limitations. In federal, we go by the United States Constitution, and you have to know how to play that game. The congressional game is a very different game. You have to understand the appropriations. You have to have the relationships. Those are relationships that we've been building for more than 12 years. So for me to say that my expertise was local, it was never local. But I've always served as the person who went for the local people to advocate for their needs. And that's where I advocated, and that's where I lobbied in Congress. Now, also, I'm the only person in the race who's ever written congressional bills, who's ever written congressional amendments, who's had them passed, who's negotiated with both parties, and actually moved bills through Congress. That's a huge difference. And so when everybody says, oh, why didn't you go through the ranks? It's because I'm not a lifetime politician. I don't believe in being a lifetime politician. If we see the people who have actually done the most in Congress, they're not lifetime politicians. And the reason why is because when your career is based on being a politician, you will do whatever it takes to keep that career. And that's where we have people who start conforming because they're afraid of who's going to donate. They're afraid who's going to support them. They're afraid that if they lose this job, that they'll have no other job. This job is not, going to Congress is not going to give me a boost. It's not going to give me a pay raise. This is my duty to help our people, for us to actually move forward as a district. I have watched our legislators sit there and say nothing. I've watched them even in Congress do nothing. And even with this past election, when Alcee Hastings, the congressman, when he was ill, we all knew that there was going to be appropriations with earmarks. Everyone was aware about that, but no one started pushing and asking the other members to earmark something for our district. Everybody who's an elected official watched that happen. And look at where we are now. Our district has no earmarks, not one. No one stood up and said anything. Our district.
All right, so you're saying a lot, but I think we might need to take a little step back with the civics lesson and then move a little forward. So when you say you're saying that you are a lobbyist and you have all this federal experience, like every time I hear the word lobbyist, it just don't sound good to me, right? Like is it lobbyist seem like it's someone's, like big tobacco or some other some other corporation. They want you to go to Congress and push something through, because a lot of times regular folks or poor folks can't afford to send a lobbyist to Congress to represent what it is that they need. So for those of us that have that misconception about what a lobbyist is and what a lobbyist does, explain that first and tell us who it is you lobbied for. Was it for a particular group or was it a particular issue? Tell us about that first, and then we can probably move on and talk a little bit, because I just want to, just in case folks are thinking the way I'm thinking.
So lobbyists pretty much are advocates. And so you can choose to advocate for which organization. Because I'm in healthcare, I've always been working with the Healthcare Association of Florida, home health and hospice. So we have been advocating for our shut-in elderly patients, pediatric patients, so they can have access. And then we also lobby for nurses, CNAs, HHAs, anybody who's in the process. The reason why these industries actually go towards the lobbying perspective, because most of our patients are on Medicaid and Medicare. They're under.
So you're lobbying for them to have access to what?
Healthcare. If we look at one of the issues that we have in healthcare,
so when you say you're lobbying for that organization to what? Provide healthcare to these individuals, or in order for them to build Medicaid and Medicare for the services that's being provided to the people there? What side of it are you on?
We're on the side of access to healthcare. So what we do is ensure that minorities who actually have Medicaid and Medicare are able to have their full services. Many of us can't even navigate the waters. Some people are dropped. So they have some bills that have these undue burdens where you have to go to the doctor every month or every week to get an update. But the nature of the service is that you can't even get up to go into it. That's why you're homebound. So there's different inequalities that we found, not just with the patient services, but also with the CNAs and the HHAs. They have been getting paid a low rate, which that rate is determined by the federal government. So when we come in and we say, oh, we're advocating with the federal government, because those fundings are federal dollars. That funding comes from appropriations. So the proper means where you want to challenge that funding is through Congress.
So while you're on that, so I have a question. You advocate for healthcare, and that is your strength. That's your.
You said access to healthcare.
Okay, access to healthcare, but no, her strength is the healthcare industry, right, Sheila?
Healthcare and economics.
Healthcare and economics. Great. All right. So with that, you're running for a district, District 20. So your strong strength is in healthcare and economics. What about other issues that some of your constituents will have in terms of, for instance, right now we have 2 bills sitting in the legislature that we would love to pass, which is the John Lewis bill and then the police reform bill with George Floyd. What are your thoughts on that? And you said that you've created bills, push them through Congress, and so you have that experience. Based on your experience, how do you think we will fare with those 2 bills coming up? And then if you should get this seat, what will be your plan of attack for all intents purposes to get this passed?
We can't hear you.
Could you hear me now?
Yes.
So the John Lewis bill was actually passed by the House last night. The real difficulty is going to be in the Senate. Anytime when it comes to negotiating bills, it really comes down to the exchange and really understanding who the problem or the people who might be resistant, and really looking at how does it impact their demographic or what are we going to exchange. For example, if we don't have people, So in the Senate, there's people who we know are going to oppose some of these bills. We need to look at and see how are their constituents looking at it. Because if your constituents are going to have an issue, I'm going to make sure we can point it out to them. And we have those deep conversations. What I bring that's different to it is because I know how to negotiate those kinds of bills. I know how to add and write in the district where other people don't have that necessary experience of actually writing us in. Part of that advocacy that we do in Congress is writing bills, is writing amendments and tweaking it so it actually fits us. What we see right now going on is that it seems like the steam and the power we had when it was going into George Floyd is kind of dissipating. People are feeling like, oh, we kind of let it go. So if our community, which is one of the largest voting blocks, have let it go, then we don't have to address that issue. That takes us having to lobby that again or rally that again and let them know that social justice is a huge issue for us. And that's why I spend so much time educating the community about where we are, educating the community about really what's going on with our social justice issues and how we fight.
Well, tell her, okay, all right, Sheila. So where are we on this social justice issue, right? I understand, we're talking about like, you got to have these relationships and, and to me, when I'm hearing, oh no, you got to know how to talk to these folks and see what it is that they need for their particular community is basically like, okay, this is what it sounds like to me. And I don't, and I don't know if others are getting this impression. It sounds like we were like, okay, so what do you need in St. Louis, Missouri? All right. So like if we give you what you need in St. Louis, Missouri, are you going to go ahead and vote for us for this George Floyd criminal justice? That's what it sounds like to me. I don't know if that's what you're trying to communicate, but explain that to me a little bit better. If it's not a matter of like, okay, listen, this is the right thing to do. We witnessed some very horrible behavior by a lot of law enforcement because a lot of behavior was going unchecked. There's too many differences in terms of how police officers are trained throughout the United States. And we need to address those things, right? It's unfairness. Like at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do, as opposed to like, okay, if you vote on this, then I'll give you something that you need in that community. Am I being delusional that we should be able to just make the argument that it's the right thing to do? Or, do we really have to go like, okay, tell me what you need and I'll get you that if you go ahead and vote for this for me?
Well, no, it's not. It's twofold, right? Delusional about saying it's the right thing to do. Of course, they're not doing what's the right thing to do because it's the right thing to do it. When I said we look at your demographic, if we're looking at St. Louis, Missouri, I guarantee you that we'll see injustices right there, just like we see in South Florida. When we look at it, we'll take a deeper dive into your district because usually the person who is protecting these police officers, the same person who's protecting white supremacists, there's a reason why they're protecting it. And if we have to dig in there and find out this is what's going on and you have involvement and put that out there, then we have to do that. But to think that certain people who have been upholding this system, who have been supporting it and suppressing it, are going to do it because it's the right thing to do, that never happens. That's not going to happen. We have to attack this from a more strategic perspective. It's not even about you give and you get. It's about really exposing what's going on. And a lot of people are afraid to expose what's going on. And the real reasons why certain people aren't signing on to the George Floyd bill is because they uphold it. Their donors they subscribe to white supremacists. That's the reality of the country we live in. We've been able to sit there and let politicians pretend and ignore the foul stench of racism. And not even attack, like, why is your donor supporting racists? And that's what I'm talking about. We take a deep dive and look at and say, okay, what's going on here? It's not necessarily like, I give you that, I give you this. No, there has to be someone who's not afraid to point out, because 9 times out of 10, that same person who's donating to that congressman is probably donating to the one who's staying quiet. So that's where the negotiation comes. And that's why it's so important that we have people in Congress who are unbought. And this can't be like your highest position. You can't be so desperate to be in that seat because you will concede. That is why our district is where it is. That's why we haven't been able to move forward. And that's the reality of what politics in the United States has been. We don't call people out. We don't point out who that donor is. The same donor who donated to this person who's blocking the bill donated to a white supremacist organization. That's the reality we live in. So we can't think that by being nice and say, hey guys, it's morally right, let's do it, it's going to happen, because it's not the case. We have to be more aggressive than that and kind of show where the root is. Who are you? And expose that.
So, all right. So I have a question. I was doing some research and I realized, well, not research, I did some research, and then the top 3 poorest cities in Florida are Belglade, Opelika, and Pahokee. 2 of those cities are in your district. Are there any plans that you have, if you take this seat, on how you can better help those cities and get them into a place where, and they are predominantly Black. Are there any plans that you have going in that you would do for those cities to get those cities into a better position?
I definitely have a plan for those cities, and those cities are part of our People's Prosperity Plan, in which we're not just proposing economic stimulus checks, but you have to bring better jobs that are competitive. Right now in those areas, we don't have competitive jobs. We don't even have continuing education systems there. I was just in Belgrade this whole weekend. And when we were there this whole weekend, we were talking about how can we create more jobs and how can we create more learning centers. Little simple things that we take for granted in Belgrade and other places in the district, they don't have access to. Number one, the infrastructure for internet. That's something that we see money already being put out for infrastructure, but there was monies that were already put to make sure that we had the wiring for the internet. And we don't have that in Belgrade. When I was in Belgrade, even if you look at the transportation system, it's inequitable. Because if you're coming in and out, you have to be working a certain amount of hours. So we had to bus people in. So now changing those ways of actually accessing jobs, having more people being more competitive by giving them continuing education and bringing in jobs that kind of deal with what they're good at. And what we see now is that our district has 2 portions. We have Belgrade, which is very agricultural, and then we have more city places, which is more in Broward. And the 2 deserts that we have, in Broward, we have some food deserts, which is natural fruits. But in Belgrade and Pahokee, we see that they're lacking healthcare and other jobs. We can use the 2 to swap. We can have food trucks that bring food from Belgrade into Broward County, into the schools. Well, now we have natural foods to actually help our students and our citizens here. And we also can send workers over there to train them. So we actually have a robust program where we're focusing on targeting both of those areas. And the thing about it, too, that makes us distinct is that I'm the only one who has the experience in doing both of those things. And we talk about what have I been able to do. I've been doing healthcare regulation for a very long time, but simultaneously, I've been doing small business growth. I am the leadership director for the Haitian Chamber. When it came to educating the community how to prepare themselves during COVID and how to find resources, I was hands-on. The only people who are really having everyday classes or teaching people how to prepare their finances, even to get the loan, was me and Ted Deutsch. Every afternoon at 6 o'clock, he had a meeting. The chamber had meetings twice a week, explaining to the community how to put yourself in order. When we talk about infrastructure, it is not just infrastructure as in buildings. It is people, and it is also small businesses. And we have to direct funding to start growing those in those 2 areas. But unfortunately, those 2 areas, the elected officials in those areas turn a blind eye to the problem. I don't know if you guys have ever been there, but I was there all weekend. There's a huge amount of people who are there who are minorities. There's a large Hispanic, a large Haitian, a large Caribbean. And I did not see not one center where they can go and use a computer for free. Not one.
So your prosperity plan, I'd like for you to break that down a little bit, because the word on the street is the word on the street.
So okay. So I wanted to. I'm sorry for cutting you off, co-host, but I wanted to follow up on the idea of like bringing food or fruits or vegetables from Belglade, Immokalee, South Bay, that area, and bringing it into Broward County. How would you be able to develop such a program like that? How would that be funded? Like how would that because it's a good thing to say. Oh yeah, all we got to do is get the farmers in Belglade to put all that stuff on a bus and bring it to Broward. What are they going to bring it to Broward to sell to people in Broward? Or are they going to bring it to Broward and give it away? Who's going to provide the bus? Who's going to pay the people that have to pick it and bring it? Like, how's that going to happen? I mean, this sounds like a good idea, but like, really, how is that going to happen? How do you get all of the moving pieces, the folks involved who would need to do that? Because I got a whole bunch of ideas that I could come up with in my head, but how am I going to actually be able to execute something like that, right? Because it's one thing, like, yes, they will pick it, and then all that stuff has a shelf life. Somebody has to bring it. You have to have a place to store it. You got to get people that's willing to pay the money for it, and all of these different things. Because you got FDA regulations that you have to follow through and things. So how would one thing to say that, how would you actually do something like that?
That's an awesome question, because that's been my specialty. So in my business, I don't get promoted or I don't do well if I don't have a plan to do it. And so what exists already, and mind you, I specialize in regulation. And so there are already regulations in place. That's how you get food pantries that have buses that come in and they bring the food into it. The system's already planned. It's already there. What we would be doing is diverting certain funding that directly is, we write them in. So when we do policy, you're an attorney, you understand this. When we write policy, you're literally writing your people in. You write it tailored. So we would just have to write a grant that's going to say that we're extending this amount of funds to just stem off what they already have, because we have food pantries, but we want to give it to people who live in these districts and who are actually working in these districts so they can continue the program. What we're finding right now is that the people who are getting the grants do not live in the district. They're giving it to people outside the district who come in and do a food pantry and take it out and do charity to other parts of it. That is dependency. That is not sustainability. So it is already present. And all we have to do is make sure we're writing our people in. So we're not starting from scratch. And that's a sad part about what happens a lot. We believe that we're starting from scratch when we see other people in other communities having these programs every single day. But we never wake up and say, the expectation is for us to be written in. So those blueprints.
So even if you say write the people in, right? So you would have to have a person that's from that area, that understand that, and that's in position to do it. And that person may in fact exist. I don't know. How do you identify that individual? Because last year during the pandemic, I volunteered at a lot of those food giveaways, with Farm Share and all these different organizations. I'm not trying to say anything to say negatively about them, but like, I know one of the things that they did, they were giving out food. Some of that stuff is like, you better cook it today or it's going to be expired tomorrow. You know what I mean? That's kind of what was happening. So that's one thing. So you do have these organizations that's giving food that's like, okay, hurry up, here's 4 gallons of milk, figure out how you're going to drink all of that in a week. Is that really what folks need? And who is the person that's already in that community that would be able to do that? And I'm not saying you need to get someone from the outside, but if there was someone local, how would you go about identifying the person that's already there, that's able to do that can make this program work?
Well, we've already identified several. And that's why I mentioned that we were in Belgrade, Pahokee all weekend. And as we keep going in and talking to the people and assessing their needs, different small business owners, different entrepreneurs, they lay out their plan. And they're like, hey, this is how we can help. This is what we can do. And that's through the relationship building from being on the ground. And that's why it's so important to be on the ground, talking to them, identifying their skills, and being able to facilitate them. It's really important that we understand what the role of a member of Congress is. The role of the member of Congress is to write policies, to write bills, to understand how to negotiate diplomatically to ensure that these are passed.
But whatever they're doing is supposed to help all the people in the community, not just like a small business, right? Like, because everybody in those areas aren't going to be business owners. Some of them is like, yo, I just need a gig. I just need to know how to figure out I can eat. I just need like some sort of program for my kid. So I'm hearing a lot of stuff about how you're going to help like small businesses, but like, that's not going to be everybody. What is it that you can do for just some regular folks that be like, you know what? I'm content working in a hotel or whatever, making like $9 or $10 an hour, and make sure I have like, enough health insurance for my kid, and that's it. So what are we doing for them? Not the business people. What are we doing for them?
As I recall, the question that you were asking, we're targeting on Belgrade and Pahokee, and most of that market and the people who are there who are working are agricultural. And so the reason why we want to lift up businesses and their specific need and nature is because they've specialized. And once we can raise up those businesses, they can start now employing for a higher rate. And that's where we become competitive. Now, for regular people, everyday people, what we're proposing is an economic stimulus check of $1,000 a month. And the reason why we even propose this is because for the last year, the number one thing that Congress has been advocating and fighting over is how do we prevent an economic collapse? And so part of that has been talking about what kind of UBI programs we're going to test. And we saw that the first set of stimulus bills that went out, the checks that came out, they were more equitable. Right now, Congress has chose to go towards the child tax credit. The child tax credit is not equitable. And the reason why it's not equitable is because if you don't have a child, then you have no way of recovering. Now, many cities and many mayors and elected officials have realized that. So we found more than 30 mayors who are already testing out a UBI program until we have economic recovery. Why is this so important for our district? Is because our district is over 50% 55 and older. So what that means is for regular people, if you don't have kids, you are not getting an economic recovery check. It's not proactive. And that's where we start getting cut out. That means most of us were not cut out. The people who work at the hotel, their hours were cut. A lot of things are not the same. We see inflation everywhere. So if we don't do something to recover, we will be behind. And that's why we have a People's Prosperity Plan. Not because it can never happen, because that's the conversation. We see that 3 weeks ago, Congresswoman Omar, she put forth a stimulus bill that was close, very similar to mine, for $1,200. And I say it again, this is what we're trying to prevent. Everybody's trying to prevent an economic collapse. We see the Delta variant that's moving by quickly. People are talking about, are we going to have another closing? People are becoming hesitant. Where will we be as a community? How will we recover? And so we have to understand what is going on and be timely about it, because we will be left out. It will be us who don't have any stimulus. The stimulus is not a favor. It's because no one wants to be in a city that is falling down because there's no finances. So that's the reality of where we are. So I find it very interesting when people don't acknowledge the need for stimulus. And they don't even acknowledge how much we have to put out to feed, how much money we have to put out to take care of the community when there's other people who aren't being taxed. And so I'm very clear when it comes to my prosperity plan, which is on my website, on how we're going to pay for it, which we're going to tax people who are leaning towards automation, those companies. When we tax them 5%, and then when we tax people who sell our private information, who don't pay taxes now, 5%, we found that there was over $600 billion that can come in on a yearly basis. For anybody to say that we don't have $1,000 for people who would make less than $75,000 a year for at least a year economic stimulus, you don't know the math. You don't understand the conversation. So it's a real issue, and we have to be serious about it. And we have to ask ourselves, why is it that Gainesville is looking at a program to pay ex-felons $500 a month? But here in Broward County and in Palm Beach County, when we have two of the most poorest, we're not looking at anything. It's a real problem. And we have to ask ourselves, where are we going to be? If it's up to me, I'm going to make sure we're in the forefront. We're going to be competitive. And I tell you, small businesses are the heart of our community. You know why? Because we hire our own. When you have other businesses that come in, they do not prefer us. They do not hire us. They do not pay us the same.
When you're saying us, do you mean people of color, or I don't want to assume what the us mean that you're talking about?
Us is people of color and people in the district. You know, when we were working on these other projects, we get federal contracts. We help federal contracts. There was one woman who they brought in from Wyoming to do vaccines. And then you want to ask me why we're not getting vaccinated? And she brought in a whole staff from floating, paying those nurses more than they pay the nurses here from Wyoming. This is why our district has such high poverty rates, because we allow people to come in and get funding that's designated for our district. And when that was going on, not one elected official spoke up, not one. I was the only one writing letters saying that there's no way she can stay here. And I simply pointed to the clause. When President Joe Biden set aside that minority mission, he specifically he wrote us in. Each minority must, every area, it has to be reflected with contractors that look like the district. I'm the only one who pointed it out. The power of the pen, understanding what federal law does, understanding how you write your community in. And that's how we got Black women, minority women, Black men on that contract. If not, it would have been all to Wyoming. And that's our reality.
So, and your plan for the $1,000, you said $1,000, right, Sheila?
Yes.
I'm liking it. I'm hoping that that's something that you can push. But we have a question in the chat that's about that $1,000, and I also want you to be able to clarify this a little bit, because people are in the community are just saying, "Oh, she's promising $1,000," and they don't understand. We read your plan. I went and researched your plan. I know exactly what you're trying to do. But the outside community are like, "Oh, she's just talking about $1,000," and you have to explain that. So there's a comment in the chat that says, your campaign has heavily advocated for the 1,000 UBI program. As a freshman of Congress, how will you commit to such a large campaign promise? Why not just push the Rep. Omar bill? And how will you get this done with just 2 years, with the seat expected to be highly competitive race for the next 4 years?
Well, actually, this is a special election, so it's only 8 months, and then you have to run again in August and November of 2022.
Right.
So I want to point out that Rep. Omar, she put out that bill, which is very similar to my bill. She did that 2 weeks ago. We wrote the People's Prosperity Plan 6 months ago. 6 months ago. And so I want to tell everybody, and this is what there's a timing issue.
Mm-hmm.
When you're going back and forth to DC, when you're advocating, you hear the conversation, you start understanding what's going to be pushed and what's not going to be pushed. And that's why I tell everybody this election is about economic and social justice. This is the conversation everyone is having. Who is going to recover? So if you ask me how I'm going to push that bill and is it so far-fetched, it's not far-fetched. And the reason why I can push the bill is because these are the conversations we were having even before Rep. Omar put out her bill. And I actually compare her bill to mine. And surprisingly, she put that bill out 3 months after my bill was out there. And I talked to people in DC about what we need to do. So I actually saw where that came from. It's not the first time that I wrote bills or amendments and asked members of Congress to sign on to that. And so as a freshman member who understands what's being disputed, who understands who's pushing it, do I have success in pushing it? 110%. You know why? Because Rep. Omar is looking for $1,200. And if you've ever gone through negotiation, you know that she's asking for $1,200. Mine is less than that. And the way I'm proposing it is more equitable and we actually have funding. So that's how it can be done. And yeah, it's a special election, but that doesn't mean the fight ever ends. We already have people who support the plan. We already have members of Congress who are like, it's a great plan. If you look at Rep. Omar's bill, that part that asks for $1,200, over 100 members of Congress said they support it, including Frederica Wilson. So my next question is, when I first came up with it, everybody said, oh, it's crazy, it could never happen. Look, it's happening. And we need to understand that we're our only limits. We have the limitation.
You said, I think I heard you say that you said one of the difference with your plan and her plan is that yours have funding, right? So you're proposing.
Okay. I didn't say ours has funding. What I'm saying is that our funding sources are different, and she's asking for more money.
Oh, you mean the way to get the money? But I mean, you would still have to convince them to go ahead and tax these two different groups, the automation, group that you said. You would still have to convince your other members of the House to agree to do that, right? And I suspect they would have lobbyists to say we're not paying 5% of
the
anything.
Automation tax has been in dispute now for more than 7 years, and more people are agreeing with the automation tax, especially after the pandemic. The automation tax has been in dispute because more and more companies were predicting to go there. But what COVID did, it expedited it. So we have a lot more people who lost jobs quickly. And so that's why now people are putting forth really hard plans. I'm saying 5. Other people are saying 7. Because they saw this, it happened like overnight. When people were predicting we're going to automation in 5 or 10 years. Do you remember that conversation? It happened for us with COVID in a year.
No, I understand we're going to do that, but I mean, like, how are you going to really get to tax those industries and get them to pay this money? So
what I'm saying is that the consensus is already there. The automation tax, the consensus is already there. The private tax, the consensus is already there. The only question right now is, after this tax happens, where do we use it? How much of it do we use? That's the only real question that we have right now. Where and how much? So the things that I'm proposing, these aren't things that I'm going to be the first person to bring them to light and say, hey, this is what we're going to do, which is important that you know that, because if you look at my plan, it's exactly that. It's a plan to hit the ground running. And so let's ask ourselves, how many people have a plan in the race to hit the ground running?
All right. Well, so it's great to break that down. And it's I think you did break down what the $1,000 meant so that people can understand it's something you're proposing, something that you've worked on for quite a while, and it's something that you can see that will, you can come up with it as long as you get some support. So the next question I have for you is, so we had 2 other candidates come on, and there was a theme going in terms of, and I'm doing this because I want you to clear up information, right? Everybody understand where you are at, right? So you are one of the candidates that has the most money in their campaign. And you made it very clear in the beginning that you're not bought, that, you get to say and do what you want because you're not taking any corporate funds and all that other stuff. So that sounds, that sounds great. So, and we also, if you watch the show, Sandra's one of the ones that champions you because you believe in yourself that much that you're putting the money in. So some of the questions and some of the community has been talking about is, one thing is, okay, you put a lot of money into that. but what have you done for the community? Because if you can put all this money into a campaign, you should be able to put it in the community. And I know you can clear that up. The second one is
answer that one first, and then you'll ask the part two.
Yeah, let me ask the part two. But tell people about what you've done in the community and how you've invested in reinvested into your community, your District 20 community.
So for years, we've been having our floating clinics where we had vaccination days. We have been paying healthcare officials and different medical people to come around and do different screenings for diabetes. I have been feeding the community from forever. I've always been a silent investor because I just give from my heart. It's not because I feel like I need to broadcast it. We've been creating so many jobs. I have a vocational school where we have done continuing education, gave free certificates for over 5,000 people. Like I mentioned, we had a bus service going from Belgrade, taking over 40 people from Belgrade into Miami to go work because they actually pulled down the funds. So I've always been vested in giving to the community and doing for the community. And I never felt a need to put that forward. Even when we need to get more masks, I immediately called and we purchased masks and gave out masks. We had a partnership with the Department of Health and Minority Equality, and we gave out over 100,000 masks. I've done so many things, including supported other candidates when they ran. But those are the things that I've been able to do with the money that I've acquired. But I think what's interesting is that once I started running, every election that I've had, I've always put money into my races. And I always put the money in the races that was needed. This election is very different because we have much more people. So you have to get your message out. And we have a lot more people who are able to vote in this election. So the equation of how much money you put into the election as far as to outreach that's all it was. It was a simple equation, right? And if you look at the other elections, like in Louisiana, they were looking at 1.6 million each for them to actually get their message out. When we looked at even in Cleveland, they had over 4 million. So when you're looking at what it takes for these special elections to draw people out, that is an equation that is simply mathematical. Now, when you add it together, why that in this election, it was a mathematical situation. But I've been here doing stuff for years, giving jobs from West Palm Beach to Broward to investing to even sponsoring and giving childcare. We just gave over $10,000 in daycare scholarships. Before that, we gave over $10,000 in college scholarships. Never publicized it. Always just did what we needed to do because we need to see our community grow. I can tell you honestly that my mother was a maid and she came from Haiti. My dad worked as a taxi cab driver whose mother's Dominican and he lived in Haiti. And so we came from nothing to come to this point. And I think it's funny how people like to mention how much I put into the race, but I understand. And I say, I understand you're not the first person who was intimidated by my success. But the good thing about it for my community is that I fought hard to be here. And with everything I have, I'm going to throw it into this race to win. That's the same way I'm going to fight in Congress. Every time I went to DC to advocate, no one paid me to go. I paid my own money to go. I paid my own money to have people with me to fight for the community. So I understand that a lot of people who get up, they always want to talk about it, but I understand their fear and intimidation because other members of Congress are in fear and they're intimidated. To be honest with you, throughout the whole country, I have the #1 receipts in my account. That's a Black woman who's 42 from the poorest district. That's what they said, from the poorest district. Understand the narrative. The question is, how did I make it? Because I fought hard and I shouldn't be the only one. That's not what this is about. We need to break all the barriers so they can see our district for who it is.
Well, and thank you for that. And I don't think those who are talking about it are intimidated by your success. I think there's some community people who genuinely feel some type of way about it. And I think it's important that you clear that up because, the community is your constituents and they're the ones that are going to vote. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but, I was thinking about the other, because there've been people who try to justify. We had an issue with the Sun Sentinel even. The Sun Sentinel wrote an article saying that we took out $2.3 million, which is a lie.
And if you even clicked on it, it showed them that. And so we had to threaten them to sue them. And they republished it and said, oh, no, she didn't receive that. They only received 1 million. And that was in the beginning of COVID, where we had to pay our workers who couldn't go to work because they had COVID. So I want to make it clear the reason why I always bring this up, because when white men donate and put into their campaigns, they are revered. You know, they're business savvy. They're hardworking. Look at how they got there, when really their parents gave it to them. But when you have a Black woman who did everything, who worked hard with my hands night and day as a single mother, the conversation is, oh, you're trying to mess it up. No, I worked hard. And we can't let these stereotypes and these narratives when we have Black successful people in these positions, because that is not the conversation they had when it was white men.
Sure. But just addressing a personal thing. What do you mean by stop defending? So break that down for me. Tell me what am I defending?
No, I'm not saying you.
There's somebody in the chat.
Oh, but you know, we're on the clock. Sheila's here to come and discuss her platform.
Yeah, I know, but I just need
I understand. We'll have our few minutes afterwards to talk, because I know Sheila, you know, she's a very busy person.
I'm busy too, because I have somewhere to go at 6. So I'm just asking that person to tell me what they're talking about with the defending. But back to you, Sheila. Thank you so much for clearing that information up. Yes. And it's important that the community understands that from you. They need to hear from you. I really wanted that. I really wanted you to have that opportunity to talk about that, because a lot is going on, and I really want you to be able to say it and voice it yourself.
And I also want to mention something also to understand when you put money in campaigns and how it's used. We've always used our campaign to hire our constituents, the people in the community. We have had over 70 canvassers throughout the district getting paid $18 an hour, canvassing for 2 months, and in the middle of when people can't find a job. So every dime that we've had, we always put it back into the community to generate jobs. And when we have people canvassing and working for us, we treat them well. So that's how I choose to use my campaign funding, is to grow our district. And you can ask anybody, you know, when you're canvassing, I'm right there canvassing with you. If I'm taking the orders, I'm buying the food, I'm serving people, because that's what it takes to raise our community. So I just want to put that out about what this means, and every opportunity I've ever had to grow the community, I've taken it. And so I know there's a lot of misunderstanding, because a lot of people who are the competitors, they spread rumors and say, oh, she's saying she's going to pay you $1,000. I ain't paying nobody $1,000. Like, I don't even know where that came from. What we're fighting for is equal treatment. And it's just important to me that everybody understands that everyone's watching this race. And like I mentioned, because so much was put in, I put in so much, everybody now is saying that, okay, and even the article said it, throughout the whole country, I have put in more than anybody else. And as far as the #1 receipts throughout this last session, I'm number 4. And understand what that means, because that means when I get into Congress, I make a difference. People come in saying, okay, we need to talk to her, because not only does she know how to build wealth, that she can actually back it. And that's important. That's political strength. And we need to understand that.
Okay, great.
I want to say a little bit about like funding the campaign, right? And so, and I'm all for, like, you know, betting on yourself and everything like that. And you know what I was thinking when I saw that, what I was thinking of, like, I remember when Jeff Green ran for like Senate. I think that was his name. He ran for Senate like 2010, and he was like, he paid every body. He was spending all of this money, and he didn't win. So why do you think like that's a good approach? Isn't it more about, and then also even they, you know, they paid all of they didn't have volunteers, like everybody that worked on the campaign got paid. There was another candidate in the 2016 governor race that I can't remember his name. I know he's out of like Miami Beach, and he did the same thing. They paid everybody and they weren't successful. To me, I think it's like, if you can get people to volunteer, that means that people are buying into your vision, right? And then if you're paying them, it's like, you know, hey, I'm getting a check, things rough, I need some money. What's the strategy with just paying everyone as opposed to trying to get folks to volunteer for your campaign? Because it seemed like it would show more support if you can get people to volunteer instead of having to pay them. Because I've seen 2 candidates put a lot of money, and I have no problem with betting on yourself, but they put a lot of money, they paid everybody to work for them, and it didn't turn out well.
Well, that was never what my strategy was. My strategy was never, we pay everybody and take no volunteers. I've always had volunteers. Last campaign, I had over 100. This campaign, we have over 100. We've always had a people-centered movement. But I do believe that people in the community need to work, and I do believe they need jobs. And I think that community support is there. Remember, this is my third time running. The last campaign, I had 32% of the votes against the incumbent. So there's no buying an election. I've been here. I have my numbers. We've already identified my 30,000 people. So I never had any intentions of buying an election. I laugh when people say that because the last times I ran, had nothing to do with that. So for people to try and label me as a Jeff Green trying to buy an election.
And I can't remember the other guy's name, the other governor. He spent a whole bunch of money too, and he came in 6th place or something like that.
Right. So to me, it's hilarious when I hear people, you're trying to buy a race. And I was like, maybe you don't know. I mean, you guys have been seeing campaigns. You know how much money it is to each person. It's an equation, right? Am I lying? Right, it's an equation.
It's the numbers. I mean, I defended it a couple of weeks ago. We've been talking about this for a few weeks, and
so I don't know.
The first time I understand.
I don't know who's running a campaign. Maybe they didn't do the correct.
Oh, it's Philip Levine. That's who it was. Philip Levine when he ran for governor.
It's scary that people who are in the race haven't done the math. Our election's in November. Most people will get confused and think it's a general election. We're not talking about the August primaries. So my August primaries, we usually have our largest. At one point, we had 30,000, and then after that, we had 90,000. That's a primary. We're going into this with over 200,000 voters, closer to 300,000. Do the math. How much is a mailer? How much is a door knock? So that's why these races have cost more. And this is our first time being in a November race. So it's a math equation. So any candidate who's like, oh, I don't know why she's putting that in, you do. I mean, that's scary. So you didn't do the numbers? If you raise 300,000 and we're looking at potentially 300,000 who come out for the election, how you target? I digress.
I understand. All right, so we're winding down. So tell people how to get in touch with you. To find out more. I know you said you have a prosperity plan. If they want to volunteer, if you need more volunteers, how can they volunteer? If you're accepting donations still, how can they donate to your campaign?
So anybody who wants to reach me can definitely reach me on my website, SheilaForCongress.com. You can also reach me on my phone. I take so many phone calls at 954-668-5358. And it was exciting to be here. I wish I had more time to talk about the plan, but it's just so funny how when you have someone who stands up to say, let's fight for our economic justice, let's actually make some real movements and break away from the tide of just, saying what people want to hear, that it turns into, oh, I have to defend myself. But I've been consistent. I haven't budged. My message has always been about healthcare, about economic growth. It's always been about a people-led movement. It's always been that. And I've always leaned on the people. I could have brought in celebrities a long time ago. I could have said, hey, I need this and that. But I lean on the people. I walk with the people. I canvass with the people. This is about the people. And whoever they choose, I hope they choose correctly. And I'm just here to fight for the people. I work for them.
All right. So Seashell Rose says she will donate. She don't have $2 million, but she's gonna give you something. All right. And she's gonna take all of it too. She's gonna take it because it all helps. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. Oh, there's a comment about reporting, and I guess we can end on that. There's a question about are you? I guess you're supposed to report every month. I was never a candidate. So is there an issue with reporting?
No, we reported. You report every quarter, so we've reported every quarter how much we raise and how much we have. So we've been doing that reporting. The financial disclosures, that reporting, it's not, my financial disclosure time isn't up yet for me to start reporting. So, but we've always reported everything. Okay. So that's an interesting question.
All right then. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We truly appreciate you for coming. And be safe, keep campaigning. And did I do something? Oh, sorry. I don't know what happened. Did I take you off, Nani? My apologies. Okay. All right. So thank you very much for coming. It was an absolute pleasure. So tell us your social media and how to get in touch with you again, and so we could just end on that instead of the question about the reporting. It's better to end on what it is that about how to reach you.
So you can reach me at SheilaForCongress.com, or at my cell, 954-668-5358.
All right. And the links to donate is on the SheilaForCongress.com
Yes,
website?
it is. Yes, it is.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.